Can one person make a difference?
Oh, yeah.
Can one man make a difference? Well, for a victim of human trafficking, that answer is absolutely yes. Invisible Angels founder Ted Greenfield, he's going to share how his ministry impacts this evil, helping to bring light into darkness, one life at a time. He's also going to share sobering yet insightful information regarding the tragic reality of those who are caught up in human trafficking and the heroes who risk their lives to bring hope and to help set them free. He also has an incredible testimony of discovering his Jewish Messiah and how the Lord has been moving in his life ever since. So it's a great pleasure to welcome to this platform Mr. Ted Greenfield.
So I want to play a video for you guys. It's called the Ryan video. And while they're getting that ready, you can always just scan the donate or the website up there. And I want to start out with this. And I don't mean to bring the mood down, because it was awesome worship. But this is a really serious and alarming topic that's happening right now. So go ahead and play the Ryan video, and I'll see you on the other side of it. So I was sitting on the couch about a week, but maybe 3 or 4 days before Mother's Day, a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, I think. And the phone rings, and I was sick with COVID. I was just feeling miserable, and Invisible Angels had just started, right? And I answered the phone, and the guy says, "Hey, is this Ted from Invisible Angels?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "We heard about you at the End It conference from Montgomery, Alabama. My name's Tim Westlove with Homeland Security. We've got an 8-year-old boy in Knoxville, Tennessee. The father and the teacher will never see the light of day again. He was kidnapped by his father, put into a child pornography ring. He's 8 years old. We have to get the mother up from Tampa to meet our agent with him right now and get him back to Tampa. We have no way of doing this. My day job is for the next, I think, 20 days, before I announce my retirement officially from the FAA, I'm in the government. The government can't move that fast. So we have a couple of Homeland Security agents with an 8-year-old boy who was kidnapped into a child pornography ring, and we had him back home 24 hours later. And we used another plane just because I was sick with COVID. This is happening all I'm going to tell you the story of how God got a hold of me in a Bible study, but I'm also going to share with you a text that I got on the 30th of January. Hey, I have a survivor that needs a long-term placement, and her situation is critical. And I don't mean to shock you guys. I'm not making this up, and I'm not doing this for shock value or anything. She has mental health issues, physical health issues, and her mom is out to kill her. Currently, the survivor is in a very temporary situation with her cousin. Quite honestly, we could charge her at this point, but we're unable to do so. We prosecuted her trafficker a couple of years ago, but there are some more cases that we are still investigating. Her last trafficker poured acid all over her body, and she has burns on 40% of her body. She's HIV positive. Her mom wants to kill her because she snitched on her. Her mom was one of her traffickers, and that case is now being investigated, and her mom is now locked up. She's in a wheelchair, and she has seizures. Prior drug use is there, but I don't think she's actively using, to my knowledge. She has been through the ringer and then some. Any ideas how we can get her to where we need to get her? I had no idea that this was even a thing. Our last rescue trip, we got a call from the One More, and I get them all confused now, there's so many that give us a call, but the One More Child Foundation, and they had a 22-year-old trafficking survivor who testified against her trafficker. The trafficker was locked up. She was living in Miami in a safe house, and she was doing fine. The trafficker got out on a technicality and was coming to kill her, was hunting her down. She's a 22, 21-year-old kid. I mean, and we got a call, can you get her, pick her up, meet law enforcement in Miami, and get her to a safe house, which we got her to a safe house in Tampa. I got that call on a Wednesday, and we had to work with law enforcement, and Friday morning we arrived in Miami. Law enforcement was waiting I just stayed with the plane at Opa-locka Airport. Law enforcement did their thing. We don't do that. We don't go kicking down doors or anything like that. We're not a law enforcement agency. They did get, I think Lily or Ellie was her name, 21-year-old kid, and you could tell that at one point in her life, she had the most beautiful voice, and you could tell she was just very pretty. She was just covered in demonic tattoos, in demonic writing all over her chest, and this had been going on since she was 13 or 14, and she had been, again, trafficked by family members. This happens again and again and again. I had no idea that this was even a thing. So, how did I get here? I'm just a normal guy. I'm a multimedia producer. Been walking with Christ since I was 25 years old, so it's been a while. And this was not on my radar in this season of my life at all. In 2018, I was in a Bible study in Maryland. This was before COVID, before everything kind of got flipped upside down. And I was working at the FAA, and I was a pilot at this time. And this woman comes into our Bible study, and she wants to talk to us about human trafficking in the Baltimore and Washington, D.C. area. And she sat down, she started to talk, and I thought she was making it up. We have Home Depot here. The weirdest thought came to my mind. We have Home Depot here. This can't be happening. I mean, this is America. We have the highest style of, you're making this up. And I kind of tuned her out. I was like, yeah, whatever. It's just one more crazy person. And then about 5 minutes later, something gripped my heart. And I'm like, oh, she's telling the truth. She is telling the truth. This thing landed in me that night like a lead pipe. And it kept me up that night. I called a friend. I'm like, do you know anything about this? Have you heard about this? And she goes, yeah, I read this book called A21 by Christine Kane. I'm going to send it to you. So she overnights it to me. I make it through the first 100 pages, and do you guys know who Christine Kane is? Okay, so she's a pastor, preacher, teacher. She's from Hillsong in Australia. She started a group called A21, and they raise international awareness about human trafficking. I think they do some rescues, but they're more for awareness and stuff, and they do a really great job. So she sends me this book, and I make it through about the first 100 pages, and I just have to stop. It's just turning my stomach, and I'm like, I got to get involved. I want to do something. So here I am, a pilot, and not the sharpest tool in the shed sometimes. I'm like, how can I get involved? Maybe I'm doing some videos. Maybe I can do some training. Maybe I can create some multimedia modules. And so I get online, and I start kind of Googling and looking, and I stumble on a presentation by a pastor by the name of Lee Dominique from an organization called Trafficking Hope in Birmingham, Alabama. I guess this guy owns about 20 or 30 fast food franchises, so he's very well resourced, and he started an organization called Trafficking Hope and a safe house called the Well House. And he went on this YouTube program about his whole ministry, and I'm like, I got to talk to him. I want to get involved. I want to, and he just started with this idea, I want to get involved, and then 10 years later, he has this whole chain of places, and they're extremely well resourced. So I call them that next Monday morning, and I talked to the director, Amy, and I said, hey, I'm just some crazy Christian guy with an idea. And this idea just hit me, and she's laughing. She goes, okay, and here, now the pilot thing kicks in. I'm like, do you guys ever need, airplanes private aircraft to move people from one place to another? Would you guys ever need that? And she's like, you have no idea. This would be such an answer to prayer. We were actually praying about this morning, that we need an aircraft to pick up this one survivor. She had to go testify against her traffickers, and she had to testify on a double homicide case. And these things are right out of Law and Order. They're even, really horrible. And she said we had to drive this kid 10 hours to meet law enforcement so she can point out where this double homicide took place, and then drive her 10 hours back. Well, what can go wrong there? So everything can go wrong. Plus, there's one person doing 20 hours of driving in 2 days. That's insane. So she tells me this story. I'm like, oh, shoot, we could have had her there in a couple hours. So this woman, Amy, she goes, just on fire, born again, believe it. I love it. And she's just like, well, we're going to pray right now. We're going to pray right now. And I'm like, yeah. And I'm in this, I'm in this office building in the Department of Transportation, and I'm in the hallway, and she starts praying. I raise my hand. I'm going off in tongues and whatever. I can't even really remember. Right? And she prophesied over me that I'm going to be running an organization with multiple aircraft, bringing hundreds, if not thousands, of people to safety and transporting and saving human trafficking survivors. And I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. This is really cool. I'm walking, I'm like, how is this going to happen? Right, I have an airplane, but it's like a Mini Cooper with wings. It can't hold anybody, And, where's that money going to come from? Where's this? And but I know it's going to happen. I know it's going to happen, And it was just, that thing landed in my heart like a lead pipe. From that moment, from that prophecy, I didn't think so much about the prophecy. I just knew it was going to happen, right? So for the next 9 months, I was calling people, and I was talking, and I said, hey, what do you think about an organization with private aircraft? And they're like, yeah, there's somebody who does that. And so I started doing some just phone call research and calling everybody I knew. And there were 4 organizations that attempted to do this. And they all couldn't, I don't want to use the word fail, because I don't think anything that you do when you step forward in God fails. It might not work, but it never fails. So I called these guys, and for one reason or another, they didn't have the money, they didn't have the airplane. One guy lost his medical certificate. So they're like, yeah, we really need this, but we didn't, So there were 4 people, only 4 people in the country that I could find that were doing this. And I'm like, okay, well, this is what we need to do, and this is what we need to do. And there were these 9 months. It was this 9-month period of nothing. And then what happened was I was in a meeting, an FAA meeting up in D.C. at headquarters, about 40 people in the room, and all this big official meeting, and it's a government meeting, so some people are sleeping and some people aren't, right, And, I'm kind of chatting with people, across the room, and it was this big technical meeting about air traffic safety and stuff like that, and something not important at all. And, and I literally hear from God, and I hear, invisible angels. It was that whisper, invisible angels. I'm like, okay, all right, that's cool. And he tells me, invisibleangels.org. I'm like, oh, Lord, I'm a multimedia producer. That domain name is going to be $3,000. That domain, I'm buy the domain name invisibleangels.org. And I'm like, Lord, that, Teddy, buy the domain name invisibleangels.org right now. Okay, what? It's going to be $3,000. You just see. So I walk out of the meeting. And only a Messianic Jew, on fire, born again believer would talk to God like that, right? You just see. So I walk out of that meeting, and I get into my office, and I enter invisibleangels.org in my register.com account. It pops up, available, $30. Okay. All right, God, let's see where this is going to go. So the moment I hit purchase on that, God told me two things. Write a budget for this organization and speak life into it as if it already exists and it's up and running. Well, okay, I'm going to do that. And sometimes you go in these places with God where, oh man, you're calling the wrong guy to, oh yeah, I can do that. I got a mouth, And that's all I did for 9 months, was tell people about this organization that doesn't have a business card, that just has a URL. I'm a web developer, so I can do a website in 15 minutes, but I didn't even bother with that yet, because there was nothing in my brain about that. There was no images, there was no pictures, there was nothing. It was just invisible angels and speak life into it. And all I did for the next 9 months was speak life into this organization that God had planted in my head. During this time, I was writing a budget. Now, back up to the person who, oh, Lord, you picked the wrong guy. I failed accounting 3 times in college. Okay, my numbers all matched, but the formatting was all over the place. Some of it was in crayon, some of it was on tape, But my numbers match, And I said, when I have a business, I'm just going to hire a good accountant. But I did. I failed it 3 times. And then the 3rd time, I went to my instructor, Barbara Scully, who I knew her very well. I'm like, you can't make me do this again. She goes, you got to promise me one thing. I will pass you, but you make sure you promise me that you will never go into any form of accounting ever in your natural life. I said, absolutely. Done, Barbara. She gave me a B, which helped my grade point average from the 2 previous failures. So I remembered Barbara in my, in my budget writing. So I worked on this budget writing, and I didn't really understand it until about a year later, when it was like, oh, an organization like this is going to need this, and we're going to need this type of insurance, and we're going to need this, and we're going to need this type of, and then there's fuel, there's, all these airplane costs. So, God planted those seeds. I did, as long as I just kept on following, I kind of figured it out, follow those breadcrumbs, right? So, for 9 months, I'm just doing that, and COVID happens in the middle of all this. So my dad unfortunately dies, and then I have a big old house in Maryland, and life just kind of turned upside down. I sold my house in Maryland. I moved down to Florida. I was down in Florida dealing with settling my dad's affairs and everything. And then during COVID, I got into about 6 or 7 Bible studies a week, and I found myself really isolated. And at first, I was complaining about it, but then I'm like spending 6 or 7 days a week in Bible studies, and in an inordinate amount of time in prayer. I mean, just crazy time in prayer. I'm going on these 2-hour prayer walks every morning. I'm working out of the house, and this is just, I'm hearing from the Holy Spirit like crazy, And my walk with God just exploded. I received the gift of tongues. I started literally just seeing God move blades of grass. I started seeing God move in the minutia of life. And, here I am. I'm telling everybody about this vision. So I'm in this Bible study one night, and I'm telling everybody in the Bible study about the vision of invisible angels, and there was a retired United Airlines pilot in there, and he goes, that's fantastic. You know what the perfect plane for you to be? The perfect plane for you would be a Cessna P210. I'm like, oh yeah, that would be awesome. I didn't know what a Cessna P210 really was. I mean, I've seen them, but I was like, oh, good idea, great, let's go. And so after the Bible study, I got on tradeaplane.com, and I'm looking at a Cessna P210. I'm like, yeah, about $250,000 to $500,000, and 6-passenger. They're pressurized, they're turbocharged. They would be the perfect plane for us, and they've got a pretty low fuel cost as airplanes go, and then I don't need to be type rated in them, and and they have relatively low insurance costs. So I really got fixated on that P210, and this guy said, this is the perfect plane. So I really took that as a prophetic message. And then another 9 months of nothing. 9 months of absolutely nothing. And then it's like, oh, Lord, I know you spoke to me about this, and then it's just seemingly silent, right? So I'm still speaking life into the organization. I'm not getting discouraged, but it's kind of like I'm feeling like I'm in a parking lot, and but I'm still going. I'm still speaking life into it. So 9 months later, I'm back up in D.C., and I'm back up in D.C., and I'm listening to a Stephen Furtick sermon from Elevation Church, right? Yeah, it's awesome, right? So I'm listening to this sermon, and the sermon is when God gives you a green light. You ever have one of those moments where boom, I'm literally looking up under here for the blessing, I'm looking under the couch, and and he's talking when God gives you the green light, and I'm like, oh, I just got the green light. I don't know what the green light is for. I don't know anything about, I just know, Lord, you're giving me the green light. And after the sermon later on that afternoon, I just hopped on Trade a Plane just to go look at airplanes, as pilots do, and I entered tradeaplane.com in there, and the browser popped up, and the first ad that popped up was a Cessna P210, and all the ad said was, I want to donate this plane to a nonprofit. Oh, you have no idea. This happened to me. I mean, I'm just like, wow. I'm in my little, I have a little condo in D.C., and I'm like running around. I shut the computer down to open it up, make sure it's still there, and and then I'm speaking in tongues, and I'm just flipping out, And then I'm looking for the phone number to call the guy, and thank goodness it was a phone. Well, it wasn't a phone number because I would have gone crazy. Right? So I emailed him, and he calls me back the next day, and he says, Ted, this is Bill Strong. I own the Cessna P210 you emailed me about. I don't remember what I said. Human trafficking, God give me vision, you have no idea. Son, slow down. I want you to have the airplane. Yeah, I was like, okay, what do I do? What do I do now? So now at this point, I don't have a website. I don't have a business. I have nothing. I have nothing, nothing set up, right? So I said, look, I have nothing set up. How do you want to do this? I mean, he goes, you set up everything, get online, call your lawyer, do whatever you have to do. You call me when it's done, and you come over, and I'll sign the plane over to you. So I get on LegalZoom, like after I clicked off the phone with this guy, I call on LegalZoom. Now, I don't know if you guys use LegalZoom. I had a nonprofit set up in 45 minutes. I put $100 in a bank account. I ordered some business cards, right? And boom, boom, boom. And then like 2 days later, they send you, the whole package with all of your documents and everything. And 2 days later, I was all set. I mean, I was all set. So I called him back, and I said, yeah, we've got everything set up. And I've got this agreement downloaded. Plus, I work for the FAA, so I can take care of all the the internal paperwork on that side. He goes, son, that's great. I'm in a rehab hospital, so I've lost my legs to vascular Parkinson's. So here's the hospital where I'm at, and he's in the hospital. He's maybe early 80s, maybe mid 80s. So I fly out to Kansas City. I meet one of his friends. His friends takes me over to the airplane. Thing's perfect. It's a 1980. It's got the original 1980 instruments, but it's perfect. It's in perfect shape. So and it's the perfect plane for us. So go to the hospital room, and here I'm not a detail guy. My dad wanted me to go to law school. It's a good thing I didn't listen to my dad. because, here I am, I downloaded these agreements, and we're like crossing this out and crossing that out in the hospital room, and, things a mess. Anyway, he signed the airplane over to me, and then he had one of his friends fly out to Florida. And I had to get some insurance, I had to get all the insurance squared away and everything. That was December of 2021. We did our first rescue. That was October of 2021, at the end of October. November, we had to do all the insurance stuff. We did our first rescue in December of 2021. And when that happened, I didn't advertise. I didn't put it out. By this time, I had some relationships with people in the trafficking space, and I told them what I was going to do, and they all thought I was crazy. But one thing is really cool is that everybody in the human trafficking rescue space are on fire, born-again believers. God is in this fight, big time, big time. So during all these 9-month periods of nothing, I'm bouncing into these people's office, and I'm like, oh, God told me that he's going to do this, and what is the matter with you, God? Do you have a job? It must have been and it still is such a testimony, because then I show up 9 months later, I'm like, got an airplane, let's go. So I start getting calls. And so the first rescue trip we did, Emma, not her real name, and we did a little video on our website about her, trafficked. She was about 30, she was in her 30s. She was in a house with 4 other girls, so there were 5 of them. And they had been there for quite some time, if not years, and they all tried to escape. They were held by a gang member. I don't really know too many of the details. They all tried to escape. The gang members got them back, executed 4 of them, and she was one of the only ones that was living. We took her to a safe house in Tampa from Birmingham, Alabama, I think, or yeah, it was Birmingham. It was in Alabama somewhere, and I was listening to her conversation when I was flying back, because we travel. The way we work is we work with rescue agencies, Sail of Freedom, Life Recaptured, Trafficking Hope, Free Indeed, Created Women of Tampa, and the way we work is they give us a call, say we've got to get this person from A to B. We do all the logistics, everything. We have all the paperwork to fill out, and then we pick up a survivor advocate from that rescue agency, and we go get them, take them to where they need to go, and bring everybody back home. So she was in the back with the survivor advocate, and I was in the little intercom panel. I could pop in and out of their conversation, So I was popping in and out of her conversation, and she was telling us, or her, about she wanted to open up a shelter for abused dogs. And she had dreams, she had a plan, a loose plan that, this is how we do it. And I'm listening to her, I'm like, you're going to do this. You're going to, this is awesome. And we dropped her off in Tampa that night, or that afternoon. And that was our first rescue. I was on cloud 9. I just thought, so the next day I just went to the beach, it was like, oh, Lord, this is great. And later on that night, I got a call from the victim advocate that we traveled with, and when she got to the safe house after her first night, she flipped out and walked right out the front door. 25% of them go back, because our normal is too much. What this evil has done, it just changes their DNA. And I'm not a psychologist. I was a special education teacher years ago, but the trauma is so severe that some don't even want to begin. They don't even want to begin the process of healing. And she walked right out the front door. And when I was on the beach and I heard that, I just heard God telling me, keep on going. This is what you're dealing with. This is what you're dealing with. And also, you are entering a spiritual, a domain of spiritual warfare that you've never seen before. During all of these 9-month periods when I was doing nothing, or I saw nothing was happening, everything was happening to me spiritually inside, we formed a prayer group for invisible angels. And I didn't really put that together until when Emma walked out the front door. Oh my gosh. We prayed over her, but we never really got into it and prayed. We never really just dug our heels in and got into the, and just grabbed on like talons onto the situation in a mode of prayer. So we started doing that, and I say we, there's a small prayer group of 6 or 7 people. There's 2 other board members of Invisible Angels and a handful of volunteers. So the next rescue trip we did, we called her Miracle. She was unfortunately trafficked by her mother at 14. She was 18. She was handed between gangs back and forth. Now, these are all American suburban kids. These aren't immigrants. This is not what you see on the news. These are just the kids you see. They're just, and when you look at them, you'd never know. You'd never know that they have been forcibly raped 10 to 12 times a day for up to 10 years. And sold. And then the traffickers, profiting off this. And then they're trading them between gangs. Each trafficker makes about $200,000 a year off a human. Yeah, it's stomach turning, I know. So Miracle, a similar story. She tried to escape with 3 other girls, and the traffickers caught them and put them in the trunk of a car. She said she had been in the trunk of the car for hours, and it was the middle of the night. They opened the trunk of the car into some forest reserve, threw them into a retaining pond, went to kill all 4 of them, executed 3 of them, and Miracle got away. Miracle, she said she prayed a prayer, God, if you're not going to save me from this, kill me. She gets arrested like 45 minutes later. All right? Then she's in jail, mad at God. And then she just said, oh my gosh, you saved me. She's in a medical unit in a jail, perfectly safe. So a rescue organization called Heritage of Hope, through their jail ministry, found her. They called us, and we took her to a safe house, actually not in the Texas area. So, and actually, I just interviewed her about 2 or 3 months ago. She's doing great. She graduated high school, and she's having her first baby. So I don't know if she's married yet, but but she's doing really well. She's doing really well, and so the success stories that we've had, are amazing, because we can really see that we can really see that God's in this fight. So we're rocking and rolling. Everything's great with Invisible Angels. And at work, I tell people at work about us at the FA, and they're like, oh, this is fantastic. We're going to do a big story and send it out to 50,000 employees worldwide. And I'm like, this is awesome. Maybe more donations, maybe, blah, blah, blah. This is great. So they do this story on us, and I get a call a couple days later from the Washington, D.C. Flight Services Directorate Office. That's kind of like getting a call from the IRS. This can't be good. But I'm like, I'm an optimist. They're going to call me and congratulate me and see what I can do, maybe a speaking event, maybe they even want it, whatever. So I got, Mr. Greenfield, we understand that you're flying human trafficking survivors, which is very admirable. This is great. How are you doing these flights? Under what regulation? Oh, we're doing it under Part 91 humanitarian flights. No, Mr. Greenfield, you're actually operating an illegal airline. You're in violation of Part 135.141. They started naming all these laws, and I'm like, oh, this isn't going the way I thought it would. We're opening up a compliance action against you. You're looking at fines between $1 and $1.4 million. You could lose the plane. You could lose your pilot's license. We're going to have to open up a hearing on you, and we'll let you know. We'll be in touch. Click. Yeah. So I'm sitting and I just push the chair back from my desk, and I'm like, and I hear God tell me, don't worry, just tell my story. And that peace, sometimes we pray for that peace that transcends all understanding. It doesn't happen. I didn't even pray for it. That peace, when God said, don't worry, just tell my story. And I'm like, okay. And I got up away from my desk. I went into my living room. I turned on the TV. Judge Judy is on. And I'm like, yes, I'm just going to watch Judge Judy. And a friend of mine calls up, an FAA friend, and he goes, and my friend Dave he goes, hey, man, what's going on? And he said, blah, 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 blah. Oh, yeah, I just had a compliance action they opened against me, and they're going to charge me with operating an illegal airline, and they're charging me with like $1.4 million, and they could take the plane and take my pilot's license away. That's all that's going on. He goes ballistic, and he's like, oh, my God, you got to call Ed. He's the greatest lawyer. You have to get legal representation. And he tells me about Ed, and I'm like, wait a minute, Ed Page? And he goes, yeah, Ed Page. And Ed Page is a very famous lawyer. And I'm like, is Ed Page the guy that I went flying with like 2 or 3 months ago? He had a plane. He goes, oh, you know Ed Page? This is how God works. I met this guy, Ed, who had an amphibious airplane. I can't remember how I met him, but I met him through my YouTube channel, I think. And he said, yeah, I'd like you, I'll take you flying if you make some videos on my airplane. So I met this guy. We went flying a couple times. Great. Happened to be Ed Page, the attorney. So Dave gets this guy on the phone right then and there. And he goes, hey, Ted, how are you? And I told him about, they opened a compliance action against me. He goes, and literally in this lawyer voice, oh, you're in trouble. This is bad. I mean, I'm like, well, thanks for the, I said, look, Ed, I've got $5,000 in my bank account right now. That's all I got. All right. So if you can help me, I'd love it. We're a nonprofit. I'm kind of out of words at this point. He's like, don't worry, I'll help you. We have a meeting that night. He tells me what to do and how to prepare for the hearing. And then it dawns on me, this is like Law and Order. This is a big deal, and everything's online, but it's a really serious FAA hearing, and guess where I work? At the FAA. So it's like super embarrassing. So I got to call my bosses and say, yeah, by the way, everything's great. Yeah, I finished that project, and I'm being charged with operating an illegal airline. But we don't need to talk about that right now. But they were all very supportive. So the hearing gets on. The hearing starts underway, and there's all these FAA people on the Zoom call, me and Ed, and the first question they ask me is, oh, Mr. Greenfield, so how did Invisible Angels get started? I said, you guys believe in Jesus? In a government hearing. And I mean, literally, all their eyes opened up like this, and there was silence. I go, let me tell you a story. I tell them the whole story, all the little details, like 45 minutes long. I mean, all the blessings, the airplane, we got this airplane tug, we got, just the money that came in, and and everything. And they're like, this is really amazing. We'll get back to you. We'll get back to you. So my lawyer, Ed, he's like, okay, expect to hear something in about 6 months. I'm like, what do we do till then? He goes, you're shut down. You're shut down for 6 months. And, we did do a couple of flights, but they were really super illegal, and, I'm like, we better stop because if I get caught again, it's a really big deal. So, so then he said, expect to hear from him in 6 months, which is about right because nothing happens in the government fast for the next 20 days. And 3 weeks later, I get an email. Mr. Greenfield, we reached a conclusion. Can you be at this Zoom call on this date, which is like next day or day after or something like that? I'm like, absolutely. So I call my lawyer. My lawyer goes, I've been handling aviation law for 35 years. The FAA has never come back in 3 weeks and said they've come to a, they've come to their findings. He goes, this is really bad. He's like, this is an early jury routine. This is bad. I'm like, well, come on. So we get on there, and everyone gets on. It's all government official, and blah 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 blah. And they're like, Mr. Greenfield, we're going to drop all the charges against you, and you need to be a Part 135 air carrier to do this. So we're going to recommend that you become a Part 135 air carrier, and if you need anything, give us a call. We can't help you do that, but we're dropping all the charges, and let us know if you need anything. And my lawyer's like, I've never seen that happen before. And I'm like, do you know Jesus? Do you get the Jesus thing? We need to go out to lunch, right? And you don't know what testimony and what God's doing on the other side of these things. And I didn't care because I was just like, you're dealing with that. I don't even need to worry about that. Let's get moving here. We got to become a Part 135 air carrier now. That takes 4 years, about $200,000, $500,000. Takes a team of attorneys to put together all the documentation. It's an enormous deal. You just don't become an airline. So my buddy Dave and I are talking. We go out to dinner. And Dave's obviously a believer at this point. I mean, he was a believer, but to tell you at this point, he's a believer. And so we're just racking our brains. And then we're on a Zoom call one day, just he and I chatting about work. And he goes, the documentation you need is we got to call this guy Paul. Paul owns a company called part135.com, and they do documentation for new airlines. And the documentation that I needed is maybe about 4,000 or 5,000 pages of documentation. Just, you have to do what's called a compliance, and it's the government, right? So you have to do what's called a compliance document, and you have to show the FAA, which is a good safety thing now, okay? At the time, I didn't think so, but now it's like, yeah, you have to show the FAA how you will comply with every Part 91, Part 119, Part 135 regulation, all right? Hundreds of regulations. And here's the regulation, how are you going to comply with it? The document is like this. Well, this guy, Paul, his company does that, and he has this whole computer algorithm, AI, whatever. So he's like, you guys are, I told him what we do and everything. He goes, wait, you're involved in human trafficking and rescue? I said, yeah. Now, he normally charges $10,000 just for one document, right? But, you got to get the whole package. So it's $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. And then you have to pay lawyers to actually do this. So it could really run up into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So he says, you guys are involved in human trafficking? I said, yeah, we do the rescue. He goes, I want to help you. Look, I'm going to do all your paperwork for free. I'm going to do all your paperwork for free. Don't even worry about it. And when do you need it? I'm like, oh, whenever you can get it. That would be awesome. And he goes, fine, you'll get it in a couple days. He did all of our paperwork for free in 4 days. It usually takes about 6 months just to get the paperwork done. Being that I was at the FAA, God put me at the FAA 9 years ago. And when I got that job, I'm like, why am I here? Why? So by that time, I knew how to get into the ins and outs and who to call and navigate around the bureaucracy. So we got our air carrier certificate in record time in about 1.5 years. We got it in May, right? And so we are the very first Part 135 chartered airline specifically rescuing human trafficking survivors. That's just, it was just amazing. Now, you think it's over now. No, it isn't. The plane has to go through inspection. Now as a 135 pilot, I have to have drug testing, and I have to have an oral exam, and I have to go through an FAA check ride examiner. And the plane needs to be completely disassembled and inspected by the FAA for safety, which we want, commercial airplanes to be completely, safe. So the fact that this was a 1980 airplane and it had never been through a Part 135 inspection before is a big deal, because commercial airplanes have 2 types of inspections. Every 100 hours, and I don't know if you know this or not, but you're Delta or United or Southwest, anytime you get on a plane, that plane has an inspection every 100 hours by an FAA safety examiner. And people don't know this. It's really, and that inspection, that's a big deal. They don't take it apart, but they really go through it with a fine-tooth comb to make sure everything's fine. Now, our plane had never been through a Part 135 inspection before. If your plane has never had a 100-hour inspection before the 135 annual inspection, every part of that plane must be replaced that has never had a 100-hour inspection. So that annual inspection, which happens every year, where the plane is disassembled, usually that's about $12,000 to $15,000. It's $55,000. We get the bill. They start underway. They start taking things apart, and they send you weekly updates. And the first week it was like $8,000. Second week it was like $12,000. I get on the phone. I'm like, how high is this going to go? We have $17,000 in our bank account, and they're like, you've never had a 100-hour inspection on this plane. Your brakes, all your actuators, your landing gear motors, everything has to be replaced. Your flap motors, your flap has a little micro needle hole in it. That has to be replaced. They tore the plane apart. So that thing sat in maintenance for a long time, and we literally had, I think we had like $17,000 in our bank account, and then it came up to like $55,000. So it's like, Lord, how are you, what are you going to, it came in $25 at a time. It came in $25 at a time. And I went through so many kind of flip out, and I woke up one morning and I heard God say, fill your jars with oil. Fill your jars with oil. So I'm like, I can call 5 people who can donate 10 grand, and the problem's done. I know some people who have deep pockets, and I can just say, hey, here it is, right? And not that I struck out with God on this one, but it still is a mystery to me. So I called one guy, got a really icy response. No, I called the first guy, my friend Guy. He goes, I can't do $10,000, but I can do 5. Had a check that night, right? I'm like, okay, cool. This problem's going to be solved by the afternoon, right? I call the second guy, ice, Call the third person, ice. Call the fourth person, let me see what we can do. They did, they helped out a little bit. The fifth person, my friend Tony, not a believer, then he called me, like, later on that day. And I knew God was working on it because his first words, hey, Ted, how's Invisible Angels doing? I'm like, hey, Tony, quite your timing's pretty good. I told him about everything, and Tony, we need $10,000. Tony has bottles of wine that are $20,000. I mean, Tony, I know Tony very well. I've known him for 25 years. Is their, venture capitalist, and he's very blessed. Doesn't know God. And then he tells me, well, you'd probably get a lot more money if you lay off the Christianity. I'm like, oh, okay, buddy boy, So anyway, he doesn't help out, but I'm like, all right, God, you're working there. I love the guy anyway, so it's, whatever. The money came in $25 at a time. And the one thing that I learned through this is that the more I freaked out and said, God, how are you going to do this, the longer it took. And there was one day I was driving to a dinner party, and I was just like, I was just flipping out, how's this going to happen? And I heard God saying, I am making the plane perfect. I'm like, sorry. We can't speed God up, but we certainly can slow him down. And during that time, when I came to that point of surrender, I'm like, you know what? It's your ministry. I'm just driving. It's your ministry. Whatever. I mean, I know you're gonna. You get to this point even when you've seen so many miracles, we still have this place where we don't believe. Until you get to that point of surrender, and that's what God wants, that point of ultimate surrender. We got an air carrier certificate in May. We started doing. We had to raise. The rest of the money. We got the plane back in early September, I think it was, and then right away the phone started ringing, and we started doing trips. We did a trip with Free Indeed, which is a rescue organization that we work with, and a young kid in the foster care system who was trafficked by her foster care caseworker. And he's still on the loose. And these stories are there, they're here, they're really happening. I've seen these kids. Our youngest was 8, and our oldest was 48. It happens to, it happens to everybody, but it happens to people usually by someone they know. The 48-year-old woman, we picked her up in Sarasota. We had to take her to New York, and very, very articulate, very sharp woman. I guess she had been in jail for a while, and she was like clutching her Starbucks, like, don't even look at this. She hadn't had a Starbucks in a few months. I'm like, no, I'm not going to take it. She was very sharp. She was in the back of the plane, and at one point, she was the makeup artist and personal assistant to these celebrities. She mentioned James Earl Jones, and she was in Hollywood. She got into a relationship with a truck driver, and the next thing she knows, she's somewhere where she has no idea, and boom, she's gone for a few years. It happens. I had no idea. I had no idea that this was even a reality. So here we are, a few years later, and we just had a huge blessing on the aircraft. I was flying up to Albany, Georgia, and to back up a little bit, during this time, God told me to go to the mall, and one of these things that doesn't make sense, go to the mall and start talking to stores about donating clothes. I said, okay, so I just got up and I went to the Tampa City Outlet Mall, and I walked into stores and said, hey, I'm Ted from Invisible Angels. We provide air rescue and recovery for human trafficking survivors. Do you have any clothes that you can donate? I walked out of there with boxes of brand new returned items. I mean, boxes from Tommy Hilfiger, Nautica, Lucky Brand, Brooks Brothers. So we've got partnerships now with all of these stores, and we provide each survivor with a backpack, and in the backpack is a journal, a Bible, Invisible Angel scripture cards, which are really cool, and a brand new set of clothes, perfect in their sizes, and because they usually don't have any, we pick them up, they have what they're wearing on their back. So that is a huge blessing. Plus, this is the first thing that they've actually had that's theirs in quite a while. So I was also, we've got a lot of clothes, and so we take, I don't know, I measure it in pounds now. We usually get maybe about 100 pounds, 80 to 100 pounds of brand new clothes every month, every 6 weeks. So about a month ago, I was flying these clothes up to Albany, Georgia, to Free Indeed, because they have a whole ministry and they can use them too. We've got, we just fly them up and give them away. And our main compass, called the directional gyro in our aircraft, started spinning around, like Bermuda Triangle stuff, right? And the autopilot starts doing this, and I'm like, oh Lord. My first thing is, Lord, what's this going to cost? I'm just like, oh man, come on, and I click off the autopilot, and the compass is just spinning around, and I'm like, it's a beautiful day, I don't really need it, I could, and I'm like, nah, I better turn around and go back. So I turn around, fly back to Tampa, and I fly it over to the shop, actually, and I said, here's what the deal is. God's like, I'm making the plane perfect. Well, come on, can't you do it any easier, We have, this is what we have in our bank account, this is, and so they're like, well, the new instrument, the new directional gyro, since it's a 1980, you can't find them anymore. That's about $10,000. Or you can upgrade to brand new 2025 technology, which we really need to do, for 15. And I'm like, yeah, let's just do it. All right, and that like drains our account. But yeah, let's go ahead and do it. And it's, again, the next day, I go to the bank to make it, transfer the deposit for the instrument upgrade, and somebody dropped $5,000 in the account. It was a $5,000 donation. Awesome. Then they called and they said, okay, and it's just like any other major repair. Oh, you need this and you got to replace your lights now because your lights are emitting frequencies. Your lights are from the 80s. And I'm like, yeah, we need all new LED lights. How much is that going to cost? Ugh. And the same thing happened the next day. We get an email, I still remember it, 3:21 afternoon. Hi, Ted. My wife and I would like to donate stock to Invisible Angels. We need your Fidelity, stock information, your stock account numbers. And I'm like, Lord, I'm not even going to worry about this anymore. This is just, let's get the plane back up. So actually, we're picking up the plane on Friday, and to see God work like this is just, it's beyond anything I could have imagined. And I'll ask you, what is the one question that every Christian has? The one question that every Christian has, what is that? Huh? What's my purpose? What's my will, God? Oh, what do you want me to do? God didn't want me to be a pilot and fly trafficking survivors around. God wanted me to know him. I spent all that time alone, and I'm still sort of in that season in Florida. I'm living in one of my dad's apartments he had in Tampa. He bought it in 1989, and I think he forgot about it. so it was like, and I call this place Camp Kazakhstan because it's kind of a dump, Anyway, so I stayed there during COVID, and then I redid the inside and stuff, but I'm still there. Because I didn't, I just didn't need to buy anything. But I was in this isolated space, and all I had was God for 5 years. And I kind of came out of that season, and then it's like, oh my gosh, I know what you want to do, and I know what to stay away from, and I got to stay in that lane. It's John 14, John 15. Stay aligned with God. Don't ask if you want to be a fireman or a teacher or a dog trainer or whatever. Stay in God's umbrage. Stay as close as possible. And then try something. If you don't know what it is, then try something. If you don't like it, you'll know. You'll know when it all clicks in. And I didn't know about flying. You know, it just, you know, it just like, the idea just landed in me. Wait, I love flying and I can help out. I'm not talking making videos. I can actually fly these people around. And then I felt that alignment right there. And when that woman, Amy, prophesied over me, there it is. Because that was in a season of my life where I had said a prayer before any of this happened. I was in worship bands and I was a musician for years, and I had just turned 50, and I get to this season and I get to this point in my life where, and I was in this big 18-piece band, worship band, and all this crazy big church stuff, right, and everything. And they're doing their corporate prayers, you know, and I remember just going, oh, Lord, take this next season of my life. It's yours. I don't care. I'm done. I've done everything I've wanted to do. I don't know what else to do. And it wasn't like I hate my life or anything, but I'm like, I'm out of ideas. I don't want, and I kind of don't, I mean, I've loved playing worship bands. I'm very good, and I was bass player and guitar player, and I'm done. I'm tired of this. I just, you know, take my life. And that's when things started to happen. I wasn't even a pilot when I said that prayer. I didn't even start flying until I was 52. And boom, 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 boom. 5 years later, 6 years later, I'm running an airline. Right? And I'm seeing God's miracles like crazy. And we're actually doing something really cool. And it has synthesized everything. I used to be a special ed teacher. It has synthesized everything. God put me at the FAA. I'm just about to retire from the FAA right now. And I can't believe that word came out of my mouth, retire, or now. But stay in God's will. That's what you need. And I started doing these prayer walks I told you about a few years ago. And every morning I get up and I do it about an hour and a half, sometimes maybe longer with God. I get up just to see that sunrise. And there's these nature trails in Florida that I go to, and they're just amazing. And that's where I have these amazing times with Christ. And I woke up this morning and I'm like, oh, I got to go find a place to do a prayer walk. And I've never been to Corsicana, and there's not really that many nature parks in Corsicana, from what I understand, right? So I'm driving around, and I went up to the hotel desk clerk, and I'm like, do you have a Dunkin' Donuts here? And she goes, oh, we don't have that. And I got on, and Dunkin' Donuts is like 47 miles away, but they do have a Starbucks. So I grabbed a Starbucks, and I'm just driving around the city. I'm like, I got to find a place to go for a prayer walk. And there's this big cemetery. And I don't like cemeteries or anything, but you know the one I'm talking about. It's got to be the only one here. It's enormous. So I drive in there, and I just park, and it's like 7:15, and it's rainy, and it's really cool outside, and I just start walking, and I'm looking at the gravestones, at the headstones, and I'm seeing like Ruth and Edgar, married or born in 1914, and they died in like 1980, and I could just, I'm looking, and then looking at the really old people. There was one person who was born in 1855 and died in 1940, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they went from the Civil War to the atomic bomb. And I'm just like, wow, this is so cool. And I was walking, and I said, Lord, I just love the places you lead me. And instantly I heard him say, I love the fact that you follow. I was like, wow. Will you tell me what Ruth and Edgar were fighting about before they died? I could just see Ruth and Edgar sitting, answer the phone. It hasn't been invented yet. Just, right. And I just got this big visual brain, right? I was just like, oh my God. And then I thought, one day, all of these graves are going to open up. All of these graves are going to open up. And by the way things are going, it may be soon. Maybe another 10,000 years, but I doubt it. So let's all look, and wherever we are in our life, let's just pray right now, Lord, take us under your umbrage. Take us under that shade of your of your presence. You have a plan and a mission for every one of it. And it might not be something crazy as flying people around. It could be just walking dogs. It could be taking care of somebody. It could be just staying at home. It could be Uber driving. It doesn't matter what it is. But Lord, we just pray to speak to all of us, to keep us in that John 14 place of being aligned with you. Lord, we thank you so much for the places you lead us and the places you take us and the glory that you show us, Lord. And we wrap all these people in this room, and together we just say, amen. Thanks so much, guys.
With Juliet ready to taxi, if we could set a flight following with you to Delta November. That would be awesome.
I'm Ted Greenfield, and I run Invisible Angels. And Invisible Angels provides air rescue and recovery transportation for human trafficking survivors.
My name is Glory Cornati, and I run Free Indeed. Free Indeed is an organization that locates survivors of sex trafficking.
When I first got into this space about 4 or 5 years ago, I knew nothing about the human trafficking situation here. I knew it was a problem in Cambodia, I knew it was a problem in other countries, but I had no idea that it was even happening here.
I would like to tell people, as far as sex trafficking goes, is that it happens in every single community. It's with people that you would never expect.
After being in this space for 4 or 5 years, what's so shocking is how pervasive it is, and it's all happening right in front of us.
I'm so glad you're calling me, because the girl that I was originally contacting y'all about that I need placed, I actually just transported her yesterday to the well house.
So what I do is I'm involved in the community, I'm involved in outreach, I have connections with people in law enforcement.
So I have another girl. So the night before she left, she got a phone call that her best friend that had been trafficked, and a lot of gang rape had been going on. They had been passing her around through gangs. And here's the deal. She came the night before last, so the night before the best friend left, I got her in my care. So I'm kind of hiding her out right now.
And I essentially locate survivors of sex trafficking and get them into safe home programs.
Perfect, but y'all do still have availability.
You know,
Ish, maybe.
question.
But it's not a no.
It's not a no.
I'll take that.
It's not this thing where people think that they're in the Target parking lot and somebody comes in over in a white van and snatches them up and then takes them somewhere and does awful things to them. It's not that. It is, these girls get into sex trafficking by people they know.
Now, a lot of people may have a different idea and a different perception of what a human trafficking rescue operation looks like. It's not at all what you see in the movies. By the time they come to us, it's a completely safe environment, and we are just providing the necessary transportation to get them to safe houses or residential rescue facilities.
Okay, so today is the much anticipated day. I have been corresponding back and forth with an inmate since February, so oh my goodness, and it's October. So I've been corresponding with this girl forever, and she is an inmate in a county jail, and she has been trafficked for many years. She is was a kid in foster care, and then actually was trafficked out of foster care from a foster care worker. Or we'll fly to the county jail where she's at and then pick her up and then fly her to her safe home program in another state.
Runway 5, clear for takeoff. Speed on course, wind 100 at tree.
Runway 5, clear for takeoff.
Now, we are not just hopping in the plane and taking them off to safety. It is much more complex than that. Invisible Angels is a Part 135 carrier, and we have quite a lot to comply with. For every trip, there's about 8 to 10 hours of planning and coordination with other groups that goes into each flight.
There we go. Airspeed is alive. Power is set. Nice and smooth. Good. 50, 60, 65, 70. And there we go. And we have a positive rate of climb. We get the gear up.
And we are only a daytime VFR operation. Now, that may seem really restrictive, but at the end of the day, it eliminates so much risk because we're not flying in bad weather, we're not flying at night, which eliminates all of the get-there-itis, and it makes our operation the safest possible operation.
If it's a longer trip, a flight is necessary, especially with these survivors of sex trafficking. You know, they're in very vulnerable spots, so they've had all kinds of situations to overcome, and so the quickest we can get them to their new journey and their new chapter in life, the better. So I definitely try to fly them if possible.
How you guys doing back there?
Doing okay, sir. So it's normal right now?
Oh yeah, yeah. Now it's normal.
Okay.
What was abnormal? Was there anything abnormal?
I'm not sure.
Were you scared or anything?
I was when it first started going up, just a little bit.
Oh, when we took off?
Yeah, just a little.
It was fun though, wasn't it?
It was pretty. It was nice.
Invisible Angels has been absolutely a godsend to me personally, and with Free Indeed over the last few years. They help by, they'll show up with a private plane. The convenience is absolutely amazing through Invisible Angels. So in order to fly with these girls, it's as easy as not waiting on, you know, commercial flight to see when and where and waiting in line in busy airports, but the conveniences that they come to just your everyday local small town airport and you know, pick you up from there. So it's all arranged, and they can be flexible based on the time that the intake people at the safe home needs to have the girl for intake, and all of the moving pieces as far as coordinating a rescue goes. The convenience of Invisible Angels is vital.
So it's totally amazing when this all comes together, the job is done, and somebody has just gotten their life back.
If we do not stop the cycle somewhere, all it's going to do is continue. And I just want to let everybody know that hope and healing and restoration and freedom, everybody should have access to that.